This is my grandparents' farm. It's now the home of the Williamstown Rural Lands Foundation. My name is Donna Rosenburg Manley, and my grandparents, Art and Ella Rosenburg, lived here. They were hardworking farmers, raising their own vegetables, raising chickens for eggs, and the occasional dinner. I have a unique perspective on their lives from a child's point of view, where everything is bigger than life, including my grandparents. This is my grandparents' house that they lived in most of their lives. They farmed here, raised a family, took care of their animals. I don't think they really saw farming as a fun thing to do. It was all they knew. That's how they grew up. They were both accomplished riders in a time when horses were the mode of transportation. In the house, life revolved around the kitchen. It's where my grandmother spent most of her time preparing meals. She loved to have me visit. I would help her in the kitchen and keep her company. But every morning, I'd get up early and I'd go out with the men, as she called my grandfather and my Uncle Art, and help them milk the cows. I'd come back in and pick up the white enamel pitcher and take it to my Uncle Art, and he would open the spigot to the cooler and fill it with fresh milk straight from the cow. After breakfast, when all the food was put away and the dishes were done, my grandmother would get the cards out and she would teach me canasta. Now, this is a very complicated game. It involves 2 decks and takes hours to finish. But she loved teaching me and had a great time at beating me until I got a little bit older, and then I started beating her. She had this cat named Kimmy. She would sit on a stool next to the wood stove in the kitchen to keep warm, especially in the winter. And I would push the cat off the stool so that I could sit on the stool and keep my grandmother company while she was working. I'm sure that cat hated me, and I hated that cat just as much. There was always a dog on the farm. My grandfather loved dogs, and they totally adored him. They would go everywhere with him, whether it was in the truck to go haying or out in the pasture to mend fences. One particular dog I remember is Cindy. She was a long-haired, double-coated, who knows what kind of dog she was, but she was a great farm dog. She had a herding instinct, and she would help bring the cows in. She also helped my grandfather in his continuous war with the woodchucks up in the pastures, who would dig deep holes that the cows might possibly step into and break a leg. I remember Cindy spying a woodchuck out of its hole up on the hill, and she would go up there and bark its head off, waiting for my grandfather to show up with his shotgun. She loved her job, and I think she was the best farm dog ever. My grandfather was a recycler. He kept everything. And this is where he kept all his stuff. Here in the tool shed, my grandfather used to keep all his treasures. The workbench would be loaded down with screws and bolts and nuts of every shape and size. He used all these items along with other broken tools to fix things. His favorite item was baling twine. He could fix anything with baling twine. He could fix fences. He could even fix the hay baler. He'd use baling twine to fix his overalls. My grandfather had a way with animals. He respected them for what they gave him. He also was a horse whisperer. When I was a teenager, I owned a buckskin who I brought here for the winter. That horse was so uncooperative, it was hard to get him into the trailer, but I finally got him down here, and he stayed with my grandfather. I don't know what my grandfather did to gentle him, but when I came back in the spring to pick him up, he walked right onto the trailer. My grandfather's favorite horse was Rose. She was a thoroughbred, but she was the most gentle horse. Whenever I wanted to spend time with her, I would hitch her up outside the horse barn. I'd groom her, clean her feet out, and then I'd bring her here, over to the apple tree. She would graze on the grass and eat the crab apples that came off the tree. There was always a pony here for me to ride, and my grandfather would saddle up his horse Rose and saddle up the pony, and we'd ride up through the pasture, which we referred to as the lot. When I got a little bit older and we'd have company, everybody would sit on the lawn next to the house, and my grandfather would saddle up Rose, and I'd ride her back and forth in the driveway by myself, which was a big accomplishment. I was so proud of myself, and I'd ride by everyone waving. Poor Rose, she was probably bored out of her mind, but she never let on. Most of the summer months were taken up with haying. Now, haying is serious business. This is what you're going to feed your cows over the winter. My grandfather would pick up the bales as my Uncle Art drove the tractor with the baler. My grandmother would give me a container, and I'd go along the edges of the field to pick blueberries and raspberries. Needless to say, I think I ate more than ended up in the container. I strived every morning to be on time out to the cow barn for milking. I had to stand next to the grain bin in the middle of the barn, and the original grain bin is right here, now being used as a geology exhibit. Each cow knew which stanchion they were assigned to. This is one of the original stanchions that we used in the barn. Once in a while, when a new milker was added to the herd, she wouldn't know where to go. So she'd cause a huge traffic jam till my uncle could show her where she needed to be. There was one cow that would let me groom her and pat her. That was Tan, original name I gave her because that was her color. She was at the end of the row next to the compressor. She was older, and she would let me talk to her and pat her. She was a sweet girl. One of my fondest memories was when kittens were born in the hayloft. My grandfather would help me climb up the ladder to the hayloft and show me where the kittens were, and they'd be mewing away, calling for their mom, and I'd get to sit there in the hay bales and hold them. It was like finding a treasure in the hay. It was great. I hope you've enjoyed this journey into my past. As you walk around the farm, try to remember some of the stories I've shared with you. My grandparents and my Uncle Art appear to me every time I come here like ghosts. Without them, this land, these memories, and a piece of Williamstown's history wouldn't exist.